Turn it up. Look, 100 years after 100 years, they lied to us about this and that. Told us all we from Africa. I made fiction characters turn into facts. Heard you tell me then it was not. Knowing goddamn well that trick was capped. My wife and I wrote a book about it. It's a book with knowledge, evidence, and fact. And my other book got them haters shook, cause it's helping my people take a closer look at their backgrounds in the background, showing my people where they supposed to look, showing my people where they get it from, where they hit it from, all sorts of angles. When it comes to this research, you must please first, don't trust strangers. Find out all on your own is what I highly recommend and suggest. And if you looking for answers and content about me, I highly recommend you the best. Which is my website at the link you see just across the screen. Don't let it miss you. I make it simple. I double down on that black and white. It's too official.
Well, see you everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Today I want to go over something that is very important and urgent for everyone to be aware of. Now, just a few days ago, the entire nation saw that planes, aircraft, were forced to land. They were all grounded. Those that were getting ready to leave and those that were already inbound, all forced to land. Now, in my previous live stream, I let everybody know, do not fly right now. And I also told them why, in which I'm going to tell you again here. And I'm also going to tell you the reason why they're not telling you why they were forced to land. So let's begin with the information that we were told by way of the news media.
This is a sweeping outage. We want to get right to NBC's Tom Costello, who covers aviation for us. Tom, what do we know? How many flights do we think are impacted here?
Well, at the moment, we've got more than 1,100 flight delays, and at the moment, about 95 or so cancellations. That may change through the morning. Here's what we know. This is the computer system that's called NOTAM, or it used to be called Notice to Airmen. Now it's called Notice of Air Missions. And the bottom line is, this is the computer system that pilots rely on to find out the latest information from the FAA on air safety, for example, on whether a runway is closed or perhaps airspace is closed because of military operations or a rocket launch. That system went down this morning. The FAA has been trying to get it back up, rebooting the system piece by piece. They say that they are making progress, but at the moment, still, this NOTAM computer system is not up and running at full capacity. And as a result, the ripple effect across the country is that flights are right now, some are taking off, but for the most part, many airlines, United, for example, says that it is simply not going to allow flights to depart right now because it needs this computer system up in terms of safety. You don't want pilots flying into an airport if, for example, a runway is shut down, for example, or there are particular safety advisories. So at the moment, that has slowed operations. It has not completely stopped operations. You can see we do see planes on the ramp moving on the tarmac there at LaGuardia. This will probably, though, even if they get the system up and running quickly, this will likely have an impact throughout the day. As you know, these things kind of cascade. The good news is, for the most part, the weather across the country right now, except in the Pacific Northwest, is really not a big factor. All
right, so we can rule the weather out. We could rule the weather out, just not because, you know, it was a little bit of weather happening in the Northwest Pacific. Okay, that doesn't affect the entire nation. At least not simultaneously, okay? To the point where everybody had to be grounded, right? So we could rule the weather out. That's one thing.
The flights coming into the United States from Amsterdam, from Gatwick in London, also from Frankfurt, they are still inbound as we checked with those particular airports and those flight operations. But this is all about the Notice to Airmen. Again, Notice to Air Missions. They recently changed that. And as a result, this system, which is critical to air safety, is right now in sort of a hiccup stage. By the way, you may recall that they had a similar problem affecting only air traffic in Florida. This was back on January 2nd, the most, or one of the busiest travel days of the holiday season, and Florida air traffic ground to a halt for several hours because of a computer problem.
Sorry, just real quick before I let you go, I know you want to report it out
before
a little bit more.
Before I let you go, look, she cut him off. Okay, that was very important because something happened very similar to Florida air traffic. They had to halt everything on January 2nd, 2023. It may have been reported near your, wherever you are, but that's a local situation. Not all local situations are reported nationally. And that's another thing that we're going to be getting into, because a lot of things happened that nobody's aware of. So that's about it with this one that I wanted to really show you guys. I'm going to move on to another video that I wanted to show you, because it was something that was said that was very important.
The nation's air travel system has had another long and difficult day. By late afternoon, nearly 1,300 flights had been canceled and more than 8,000 delayed because of a critical system failure at the FAA.
The failure forced the FAA to call a nationwide halt to operations for several hours. Federal officials vowed to get to the bottom of an outage that disrupted travel plans for millions of people.
A wave of delays and cancellations rippled from coast to coast just as the nation's airports were starting their day. The sudden shutdown left terminals filled with travelers with nowhere to go. The FAA's ground stop order was lifted just before 9 a.m. Eastern Time, but the disruptions lingered for hours. Pat and Allison Kavanaugh were trying to fly out of Newark, New Jersey.
I'm really upset, but what can I do?
But it makes you kind of nervous. Is there something else that maybe we're not being told right now?
The problem started late Tuesday when the FAA's Notice to Air Mission system went down. That antiquated computer system supplies information that flight crews must have before being allowed to take off. This morning, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said that initially, at least, there was no sign of a cyber attack.
There's been no direct evidence or indication of that, but we are also not going to rule that out until we have a clearer and better understanding of what's taking place.
Several hours later, he vowed to get to the bottom of what happened.
My top priority right now that the system is working again as of about...
So keep in mind, several hours later, he still has no idea what happened. He wasn't trying to rule out a cyber attack, so what else could it be?
The air travel system is heading back to a more routine schedule this evening, but today's disruptions led to the first nationwide flight stoppage since 9/11, and it's raised questions again about the reliability and vulnerability of our system. Our science and aviation special correspondent, nationwide flight stoppage since 9/11, and it's raised questions again about the reliability and vulnerability of our system. Our science and aviation special correspondent, Miles O'Brien, joins us now to look at those concerns. Miles, always good to see you. Thanks for being here. Let's start with this system, the Notice to Air Mission system that the FAA says went down late on Tuesday. What does it do, and how did it create such a mess?
So Notice to Air Missions, Amna, are the late changes to the game plan. You have published information on airports and what's available and what frequencies are working and what navigation systems are working. But things change, and before you take off, you want to know if that runway is closed or if that frequency is not working or if there's some airspace closed. That is all encapsulated in these Notice to Air Missions, formerly known as Notice to Airmen. And they are sometimes minor little changes, sometimes very important, but most important, before an airliner can be dispatched on a flight, the pilots have to be briefed on what the NOTAMs are along their route of flight. So the good news is that the remedy for this problem is you just don't take off. It's not like a situation where something like this fails, airplanes fall out of the sky, but clearly causes huge disruption if it's not working.
And we heard there Secretary Buttigieg saying they're still trying to figure out what was the root cause. How did this happen? How do they keep it from happening again? What are some of the possible theories?
Those of us who follow the FAA closely are frankly not surprised to see a technological glitch, sadly.
Not surprised.
This is an agency that has historically been underfunded on its effort to modernize. It's basically a system that was built after World War II, 1950s technology, using spinning radar domes and UHF radio transmissions.
Hold on. Let's slow it down. He's saying that these aircrafts are using 1950s technology. Keep that in mind.
system that was built after World War II, 1950s technology, using spinning radar domes and UHF radio transmissions between the ground and pilots. It hasn't moved into the space age, as it were, as it should have, using satellites and computer transmission. And so as it has moved technologically in fits and starts into the modern age, there have been glitches along the way. Nothing quite like this one, but it is indicative of the fact that the agency needs to spend more on its infrastructure. So it was glitches along the way from the 1950s until now. There was only a few minor glitches, but this is something major. So what changed? What could have possibly allowed their systems to go down? What changed in the frequencies? The fact that it is so safe is quite remarkable to me, frankly.
The fact that it is so safe is quite remarkable. Right after that,
and women who make the system work in spite of its antiquated technology.
So, okay, let's sum this up because I'm about to get into this. 1950s technology, right? Apparently their remedy is, let's beef up the technology. But you're saying that they're utilizing UHF radio frequency towers. Let's move it over to satellites. As if satellites are not just going to repeat that same signal or frequency. I'm going to tell you what this is all about. Okay, so what I really wanted to get into right here was, after I brief you all about the situation at hand, was something that I got into the day it happened, which was 1 year ago from today, back in January 2022, where I informed everybody that we do not want 5G. During that live stream, I explained how, of course, we were all introduced to 5G technology back in 2019 as if it was coming. Keep in mind, that was not the date that it was going to roll out or the date that it was going to cut on. The actual date that it was supposed to cut on was January 5th, 2022. But the problem was that the FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration, put out a statement to internet providers, cell phone providers, AT&T and Verizon, to, hey, don't put this 5G signal out because they are afraid that it may mess up their signals in their aircrafts. Now, that's very important for people to understand because that's taking things a step further when it comes to safety concerns that these people are not talking about right now. So what did Verizon and AT&T do? They delayed the rollout of 5G and gave them 6 months to get themselves together because they were going to still make it happen, regardless of what they say, do, feel. That's major. Let me explain. Now, according to reports, both companies agreed to the last-minute request made by the Secretary for the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, cited in a letter to both CEOs of each company on Friday, December 31st, 2021, that they have multiple aviation safety concerns surrounding the C-band 5G service that both companies plan to roll out, fearing that the use of C-band spectrum for 5G wireless services could interfere with sensitive aircraft electronics, disrupt flights, and result in some diversions. They even stated that C-band 5G could disrupt aircraft's radio altimeters, which allow planes to land in low visibility conditions. On their website, the FAA posted notices stating that anomalous data readings from altimeters could in turn affect a wide range of other safety systems, naming at least 17 of them, from terrain awareness and ground proximity to takeoff and flight control, as well as various warning systems. Now, of course, this is obviously dangerous, but both telecom CEOs originally rejected their request to delay the rollout, indicating that it would cost too much money to do so, and they would continue their rollout regardless. But then they both had a change of heart recently on January 3rd, 2022, stating that they would delay the rollout, but only for 2 weeks, in order for the FAA and the U.S. transportation officials to study this matter for safety reasons. But after this delay, they will eventually roll out their 5G regardless. Now, we all know that planes have been flying around, taking off, and even landing around these type of frequencies for years now. But according to the FAA, the bands of previous radio frequencies from 4G signals were around 3.4 gigahertz to 3.7 gigahertz, and that anything higher than 3.7 can cause massive problems with their systems and aircraft. in which 5G would if it isn't turned down around particular airports. Now, on this particular website, on the FAA website, there's a statement that they made on 5G. This was dated back in June 17, 2022. 5G C-band update. What's very important that I want to point out here is that they were saying that they were going to be working with these companies and making sure that everything was going to be fine and everything should be good to go and completed. It says right here to be largely completed by July 2023. And then it says after that time, the wireless companies expect to operate their networks in urban areas with minimal restrictions. Okay, now with all of that being said, this goes to show you that there's no more restrictions. They're not trying to tell everybody that the 5G is affecting the aircraft. In fact, it's going to be affecting everything that's utilizing that type of signal or frequency in this sense. Because here's an image of a UHF tower. Take a look at that. These are UHF towers. They are the exact same towers that they utilize for 3G, 4G, and 5G. The G is standing for generation. So you had the second gen, or the first gen, the second gen, the third gen, the fourth gen, now the fifth gen network. All they're doing is adding repeaters of the signal. But at a broader scale, these frequencies are much greater. That's emitting radiation. I'm going to get into that in a different video, but that's the problem right there. And they're not trying to tell people that. Now, after all of this time, ever since they announced back in 2019 that 5G is coming, after all of this time, now we're seeing the effects of 5G, and it's just begun because they are now shutting on these towers and their repeaters. Okay. And they're not even worried about the effects that it will have on other devices or other aircraft, anything that is utilizing these type of frequencies. That's including your cable, that's including your cell phone, that's including the aircraft, that's including the radio stations. And don't forget, what's very important about the radio stations is that how the police officers are going to be able to communicate if something gets shut off or something is glitching. If you need help, and let's just say, for example, the operator that you're on the phone with is trying to dispatch police officers to you, but their systems are down, how are they going to communicate? What you're going to say, their cell phone? Well, what if that's gone? What if the cell phone, radio, all of that is gone? How are they going to be able to communicate? Were they going to pull out Morse code and let them know, hey, this person needs help at such and such address? You got to think about that. They're all communications. This has to deal with communications in general. Like if communications get wiped out all across the board, what are people forced to do? What's going to happen? So with all of that being said, there is a problem that people need to pick up on when it comes to this 5G. It's always been a problem. Now, what are the effects of this 5G on humans? If it could affect planes and everything else that has to deal with that particular frequency, what about us as humans? We are electrical beings. Do we know the side effects of this type of stuff? When humans, now apparently they're not worried about people's safety. They're worried about trying to communicate with somebody. But who are they trying to communicate with? Why do they need to have, 4G was fine. There's nothing wrong with 4G. In fact, do you see any difference in your 5G network right now? Are you actually surfing the web faster on your cell phone since 5G came onto the scene? Who are they trying to communicate with? Think about that. What's so important? Who is so important that you have to enable some type of advanced technology in order to communicate with their personal people? Who is that? Who are you trying to communicate with? That's so important.
I'm just here to make you think.